All right. Welcome to the Week 9 recap edition of the Lewis and Laraib podcast, featuring your hosts, Lewis and Laraib. This week was insane for football across the entire NFL. A lot of the games were super close. We saw super interesting quarterback matchups. One of them was not so close, but we'll get to that later. First things first, we're going to go review our picks for the week, in which I'm back on top. Who would have guessed?
Barely. Yeah,
Um,
we both picked Denver, but that was a close game going into the fourth quarter, but Atlanta pulled it out, so there goes your upset. But what really killed me this week was the Chargers. Really, we could have tied by 1 point, but that goal line stand by the Las Vegas Raiders. Got to give credit to them. Just unfortunate for the Chargers, but that's what lost me my week really. Also, Alex Smith, having 2 interceptions like on game-winning drives that he could have had against the Giants, costing my week this week. But one thing I want to say, Lewis and the Raw podcast, we're probably the only people out there who picked New Orleans in the New Orleans versus Tampa Bay game. NBC did not, ESPN did not. Who else did not, Lewis?
NFL Network, neither did they. So obviously, for the best analysis, unless it has to do with Indianapolis Colts games, you come to the Lewis and Laraib podcast, and we will give you the right answers. This is one of our better weeks overall. I mean, no one really predicted Buffalo beating Seattle. So besides that, the other games were just kind of pick'ems, and we got them mostly right. So I'm proud of us this week in terms of how we did. But I got the edge and the dub. So moving on, looking back a little bit, back at last week, we're going to talk about some of the biggest headlines in our Week 9 overreactions. Laraib, I'm going to let you start with your first overreaction of the week.
My first overreaction is the fully formed New Orleans Saints team is the best team in the NFC.
Interesting.
So we saw them with Michael Thomas back, and they looked unstoppable against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 38-3. A complete, utter destruction of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who people thought they would be, the number 1 or number 2 team in the NFC. And that offense just looked so good, with Drew Brees back, finally with Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. And then Jared Cooks, he had a very nice game too, except for the fumble and maybe a drop or 2 that he had. But that offense is looking really scary. And then on the defensive side, we saw Tom Brady. He had pressure in his face all night, and he had nowhere to go on the deep ball. Marshawn Lattimore, we know he eats Mike Evans' breakfast for lunch, lunch, and dinner. And then Antonio Brown, it was just his first game for the Buccaneers, so I'll give him a little bit of a break. But, that Saints team is looking really scary. And they're number 1 in the NFC right now, and their schedule going forward, Lewis. I was talking to you a little bit about this earlier, but they only play one team for the remainder of the season who are above 500, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe in week 14 or something like that. So, for the rest of the way, only 1 or 2 more losses for the Saints team going forward.
This is an exciting time to be a Saints fan, no doubt about it. The dominating win on Sunday really shows you what this team can be in a November-December matchup in which, they're the underdogs. They have this underdog mentality going in. And like you said, they're getting a lot of their guys back. This is the Saints offense at full force. And one of the advantages, I'll say, of not having Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders in certain games this season is the other guys having to step up and they getting more reps with Drew Brees and Drew Brees trusting them a lot more in the offense. Even though obviously Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are the best receivers on the team, Deontay Harris getting a lot more reps on offense is really helping him. We saw Adam Troutman have a touchdown catch in this game. Michael Burton getting involved in the offense. All these guys, 12 different receivers caught a pass from Drew Brees, which is just his, that's his specialty, spreading the ball around. Obviously, you're going to have your main guys. Michael Thomas, him just being back on the field is so big for this offense and how it opens everything up. But the key, if the Saints team wants to differentiate themselves from the rest of the NFC and potentially go on a Super Bowl run, is this defense needs to play elite like it did on Sunday night. That pass rush led by Cameron Jordan, Trey Hendrickson, who is third in the NFL in sacks at the moment, which is just mind-boggling to me. David Onyemata, who had an interception, and then Marcus Davenport, who's getting back from injury, and he's playing very well also. So when all those horses are there, there's not a lot of teams who can block him or this unit in general. So if you can get to the passer with 4, there's not a lot of offensive lines that are as good as that Tampa offensive line. I know they were missing their guard, Ali Marpet, but besides that, they had a lot of their starters in who a lot of people were calling the best offensive line in the NFL. Well, clearly that wasn't the case on Sunday night, as Tom Brady was pressured on 56% of his offensive dropbacks in this game, which is just wild to me. We could have a whole segment talking about what Tampa did wrong, but I'm going to focus on New Orleans for the moment because Tampa was the favorite heading into this game, and we acknowledged that in our predictions podcast last week. But we understood what this Saints team has been and is about, especially in this NFC South division for the past few years, regardless of who is quarterback for any team in that division. So a butt whooping like this certainly was nice to see, but we needed to see a trend to come. And what needs to happen is this defensive line needs to play well. I'm not as worried about the offense. They might have slower games. Obviously, you're not going to score on your first, 5 out of your 6 first possessions in a football game all the time. But I will say Demario Davis had an interesting quote, which I really think resonates to how this defense needs to play for the rest of the season. This defense is only as good as Marshawn Lattimore is on a weekly basis. If Marshawn Lattimore is playing like a defensive rookie of the year, all-pro cornerback, you're going to see a lot of games which are basically shutouts, which last game was a shutout. Don't give me that crap that they scored a field goal and, basically garbage time because, you didn't get shut out. Good job. Maybe you should have gone for touchdowns and not field goals and you would have not been embarrassed like you were in Tampa. But, if Marshawn Lattimore is playing on his A game and you can just trust him, get on your island and we can do everything else. That is how this defense wants to operate. But if there's a situation where he's just not getting up for a game and, he's not motivated really, which has been a problem with Marshawn Lattimore, that's when this defense gets exposed. That's when the deep ball and the big play really hurts the Saints in a lot of games. So I think that was a very interesting quote. And if they can, if Marshawn Lattimore can turn the season around and play a lot better consistently, then yeah, I agree with you, Laraib. I think right now the Saints are the best team in the NFC. Now we'll see what happens the rest of the season. The top 3 teams at the moment all have relatively easy schedules. I know there's more tougher games for the Seahawks and a few, rough patches for the Packers here and there. But I'll say the first seed in the NFC probably has to win 13 games, and that's good. 12-4 also is not a unreasonable number. This isn't really a year where there's no clear favorite in the NFC. Last week it was Tampa, and then we just saw what happened. And we have to say it's the Saints now. So Tampa might even rebound. Antonio Brown had flashes of looking good in that offense. So we'll see what happens, but I agree with you, Laraib. This is the best team in the NFC at the moment.
Yep.
All right. We'll move on to my next overreaction. So the Miami Dolphins beat the Arizona Cardinals thanks to a missed 49-yard field goal by Zane Gonzalez, which was sent that game into overtime. And Tua got his second win in the NFL, making him 2-0 as the starter and making this Miami Dolphins team 5-3. Laraib, not only are the Dolphins making the playoffs this year, but they're getting to the divisional round. So watch out for Miami as they are
a giant overreaction, if I do say so.
All right, then.
I talked about it last week. I did have the Dolphins sneaking into the playoffs just because everyone always says defense wins championships, and this defense is going to carry this Miami offense into the playoffs. But to say that they're going to win a divisional game at most, I really see this Dolphins team being a 6th or 7th seed at the most, Right now they're at 7, but they're tied with Vegas, who's at 6, and then the Browns and Colts, who are at 8 and 9. So they're all 5-3. But if they're the 7 seed, they most likely play Kansas City or Pittsburgh, and that's an L. And if they're the 6 seed, then they play Buffalo or maybe Tennessee, and that's also an L.
Well, I gotta disagree with you because, man, this defense is really good. I know, you're playing against the best offense in the league, so they put up some points, but they made the stop when they needed to. They got Kyler Murray off the field, and Tua is really starting to impress me. I said it that I still had, a little skepticism about him. His arm didn't seem otherworldly like we've seen from Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow so far, which is going to be his comp. No matter what you say, no matter how you put it, his comp is Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. They were drafted together. That's just how it is. Eli Manning will be forever compared to Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger. And you could argue those three for days. My opinion, I'm going to go with Big Ben. But really, Phillip Rivers he's the most gifted passer, and Eli Manning he's the champion, and all this you can say about the draft class. This is the same way. They're all going to be compared to each other. Mitch Trubisky, unfairly or not, if he was drafted a year before, maybe he'd still have a job. But he's getting compared to Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, that's not a good look for him. So what I can say right now, Tua really impressed me with how he, managed this offense. They don't have the greatest weapons. They're missing, most of their running backs, a few offensive linemen, and a few receivers against the Arizona Cardinals, and they still put up 30-plus points. So credit to this team. Brian Flores is my pick right now for Coach of the Year. I love Mike Tomlin, but there's too many of these games. I don't care if they win them. Just Mike Tomlin bummers where you're on the road playing against a bad team, and he just kind of says, we'll get him later. And then he gets down to these, like huge losses in the game, and then he has to just, all right, guys, now we can start playing hard. That's not a good sign to come for the playoffs, but I love what Brian Flores has done with this defense. He's one of those few Belichick disciples who really embodies the Patriot way, in my opinion. He likes, he knows what positions to overpay for. Cornerback, linebacker, and quarterback. That's the positions, he values the most, and offensive line. And I just think this team can improve more and more and more. They have insane draft capital from the Houston Texans this season to package to even more talent or to just draft young studs along Tua. But in terms of the playoffs, here's my thing. If they get in as the 7th seed and have to travel to Kansas City or Pittsburgh, they are not winning that game. I mean, we were joking about it earlier, but they're not winning that game. But if you told me they somehow got the 6th seed and they had to travel to Buffalo, in which a game earlier this season, they only lost by 3 points with Ryan Fitzpatrick at quarterback. And I think Tua is an upgrade at quarterback. Yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick was playing well, but how long can he go an entire season starting before he has his, buzz out where he just starts playing like trash for 3 straight games, and then it's like, all right, let's move on to the young guy. They moved on to Tua early. They wanted to get him some confidence playing against not that great opponents. This week's going to be especially interesting against Justin Herbert, which is going to be the one-on-one matchup. But that defense is so impressive to me that I think if they played a Buffalo and they got the stops they needed, and this offense can do just enough against that Buffalo defense, which has not been that good so far, I could see them winning that game. Now, they're not going to be favored, and it's going to be an upset to pick them, but I really think that game will be close and it'll be so fun to watch, and they could do it. They can go to the divisional round, and this team has such a bright future. We'll get to that later when we're talking about a little fun segment, but I'm very proud of this team, and, fins up, baby. What do you think?
I mean, I have to agree, but, it's all you're talking about the Saints and how far that defense will go, and it all depends on Marshawn Lattimore. Well, this offense is going to go however how much Tua can carry them. Their defense, back-to-back weeks they've had defensive touchdowns, but you can't expect that every week, even out of the top 5 defenses, get a fumble recovery for a touchdown or get, pick six or anything like that. So it's going to come down to Tua. How much can he carry this offense? And, you look at the upcoming schedule, you play the Chargers, the Broncos, then you have the Jets, Bengals, and Chiefs, and then to finish out, you have the Patriots, Raiders, and Bills. So a very manageable schedule, and then week 17, you play the Bills. So that could be, a little bit of a playoff preview that we see. You play the Bills the last game of the season, and then next week you play them again in the playoffs. That'll be pretty crazy. But, looking at his schedule, he plays, the big games are going to be against Justin Herbert this week, and then later on he's going to play against Joe Burrow. Those are going to be the big name games against the other rookie quarterbacks. But this team is looking really good, and like you're saying, the future is very bright for this team, along with the capital that they got from the Texans. It's looking good. So, maybe they can go and get a running back from the draft, maybe because it hasn't, no one has stood out so far out of the backfield, but they look really good on both sides of the ball. But Tua, he had two very nice, Rams, he struggled a little bit. He got his footing just a bit in this game against the Cardinals, over 202 touchdowns in this game. But, he's going to have to improve just a little bit more for this team to win a playoff game, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's getting such valuable experience playing at the moment against NFL defenses with this offense. That's only going to benefit for them for the future. And as a Miami Dolphins fan, whether or not we win in the playoffs this season really doesn't matter to me. I know windows can close at any certain moment, but I really feel like they have their coach right now. Chan Gailey, the offensive coordinator, has really impressed me so far. Just veteran offense coordinator, been around the league for a while. And he really knows when to push the brakes on the guy and he's a good motivator. And you have your quarterback, I think, in Tua. Now, I want to see him against better defenses because even in his first game, you can give him a pass for that, I guess, against the Rams, but he did not look that impressive. And yeah, you're right. You can't count on a defensive touchdown every single game, but you can count on at least a turnover and a big stop on third down and bend, don't break type of defense, which I think Brian Flores has adopted from the Bill Belichick system, and it's only going to benefit them for the future. So give me the Miami Dolphins. Give me going to Kansas City, upsetting the Patriots, and they're going to win the Super Bowl. No, I'm kidding. Good for you, Miami. Let's see what you can do in the latter part of the season. Like we said, this is Overreaction Wednesday. But regardless, we're going to move on to our next topic. We have our top 5 teams in the NFL. We have our power rankings every single recap episode. Last week was a little special, but this week we're officially every single team has played at least 8 games. Some have played 9, and we're at a point where, we're really starting to get a good feel. Now there's a few games here and there that still can, flip a few things around in regarding to, seeding and where teams are going to be placed in their division games. So, and we saw we saw a few in terms of what we saw from last week's slate of games. So, Laraib, give me your top 5 teams. We'll go through all of them. We'll see how we agree and disagree. So, I'll let you start.
Starting at the number 5 spot, I have the Seattle Seahawks. At the number 4, give me the Baltimore Ravens. At the 3, give me the Saints. 2, Kansas City, and 1, Pittsburgh Steelers.
So what went in to deciding those teams? Let's start with the Seattle Seahawks. Why rank them over, let's say, a Buffalo Bills team who we just saw beat the Seattle Seahawks?
The Bills, credit where credit's due. We were talking about how they've been struggling the past couple of weeks, and that was just an explosion of offense and defense that they had. Caused Russell Wilson to have 4 turnovers, and on the other side, Josh Allen, the AFC Player of the Week, with 400 passing yards, along with 4 touchdowns. So the Bills look great, but still have to put the Seahawks in there just because on the back half, Shaquille Griffin, he was out for that game. Jamal Adams coming back from injury, so he wasn't 100%. And then that defensive line, credit. I'm giving credit to the Bills. I have to give credit to that defensive line of the Seahawks. So much has been thrown at them. oh, they're the worst in the league and all this and that. But they had 7 sacks on Josh Allen in that game. You can say, oh, well, they were throwing the ball this and that. But, 7 sacks is 7 sacks. So that's good for that, good for that defensive line. And then on the offensive side, Russell Wilson, you talked about a little bit how much, is he going to have some attrition going into the season. And it looks like, it's piling up on him. Workload's getting on him a little bit for turnovers in that game. But I still believe he can win MVP this year, and he can still pull this Seahawks, team into the playoffs, into the maybe 1 or 2, 3 seed. And their schedule going forward is not too difficult. They play the Giants, the Washington football team, along with some other, very bad teams. So, going forward, I still have them as my favorite over the Bills. But the Bills are definitely, right there at the 7, 6, or 8 spot for me.
Right. And I'm going to give you my top 5 real quick, and then we're going to go through the rest of these teams and kind of show where we disagree and what we need to see going forward from each of these teams if they want to keep their position. So my number 5 team is the Baltimore Ravens. Tough start for them on Sunday against the Colts, but really turned it around the second half. What I'm most impressed about is this defense. I really think they're starting to hit their stride. And if they can keep games close, let Lamar Jackson, who's struggled this season, let him do his thing in the running game, and this team can be dangerous. At my number 4 spot, I have a team that you have been sleeping on, and that is the Green Bay Packers, my former pick to win the NFC this season, who have a head-to-head over the New Orleans Saints if the Seahawks drop out of that 3-way tie with them at the top of the NFC. So, they haven't looked that great defensively, even last week against the 49ers or the 29ers, because they're missing a lot of players. They still, their secondary isn't great. They have playmakers here and there, but that's not going to cover the holes of an entire defense. That's what's great about football. You can have 2 or 3 great players, but there's 11 other guys on the field, and a single person could get exposed and ruin an entire unit, which I know from, secondaries past of New Orleans hell. But this is a unit that hasn't really impressed me, but this offense, Aaron Rodgers is playing at an MVP level. He's really impressed me so far this season. 24 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions coming in one game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So besides that, every other game, he's not thrown a single interception. Devontae Adams is playing out of his mind at the moment. And if Aaron Jones can come back at 100%, this offense is absolutely lethal. So they are my number 4 team. Number 3 team we talked about, the New Orleans Saints, for all the reasons we discussed already, so I'm not going to elaborate on that too much. My number 2 team is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are undefeated, but they do not look that great. They do not look like an undefeated team. And I think if they played my number 1 team right now, they would have a very tough time. And my number 1 team is the Kansas City Chiefs. They had that one loss to the Raiders, whatever. What they've showed me as a team since that loss, I had questions, but they shut me up very quickly with how they've established the running game, what they've done in the short passing game, going out, getting a Le'Veon Bell to help in the running game, even though he hasn't been too effective. And in a game like we saw last week against the Carolina Panthers, where they were a little asleep at the wheel at first, they let the Carolina Panthers really jump up and put a scare in them. Patrick Mahomes said, you know what, I'm going to put this in my hands, baby. They only ran for like 30 yards, but he absolutely dominated that game. They did just enough to win. Now, granted, a 67-yard field goal is probably not going to go in most of the time.
It was pretty close,
Yeah, sure it was. Yeah, far right. I could have caught that in the stands. But I'll say, that's my top 5 teams at the moment. What I will say to you about not having the Seahawks or the Bills, defensively, the Seahawks have not impressed me whatsoever. I know you said there's some promise, and we talked about it with their pass rush, which, getting Carlos Dunlap for a trade, Jaron Reed really coming on strong recently, and getting Jamal Adams back is going to do wonders for that pass rush. But what I've seen so far from Jamal Adams in pass coverage has been awful. If I see Stephon Diggs matched up on Jamal Adams another time this season, I am praying for him because that dude cannot cover. His hips are way too stiff. He cannot change direction. He goes one direction, forward, and it's a freight train coming at you. So if you're in Jamal Adams' way, you're gonna get destroyed. But if you're going that way, it takes him forever to turn. And that's a concern for me in that secondary because this is the guy you traded for. This is the big name that you brought in to help that defense. And he hasn't really been playing that well. And no, neither has anyone in that secondary, quite frankly. There's some promise they're going to get Shaquem Griffin back in a few weeks. Trey Flowers has been playing better recently, according to my co-host here. So there's promise for this defense. I do think they can start to turn things around. But one of the things that I've talked about on this podcast is everyone loves let Russ cook, but you're putting so much on his shoulders every single week to try and win all of these close games that it's going to wear on him just physically. And I know he's a great leader. I know he's a great person, super smart, the biggest competitor, but he's human. And every single game he has to look back and be like, damn, I have to do everything for this team just to win by 3 points. I'm doing all of this. We have the shiny weapons. Yeah. They're helping me out. But this defense is not helping me out whatsoever. And I have very big concerns about that going into the postseason. I will say the veteran leadership on this team, the experience of this team is going to help them in the postseason, no doubt. I still think they're going to make it to the divisional round. But if they play against the Tampa Bay right now, granted how Tampa Bay looked last week, that's going to be a tough game for Seattle. Or in New Orleans, that's going to be a tough game for Seattle. And in terms of the Buffalo Bills, yes, they impressed me, but I still have a lot of questions regarding that run defense. Seattle was missing a lot of their best running backs. They weren't really able to establish a heavy running game in this one, and they got down early. So, we didn't see much of that run defense. So going into the future, if you're playing a Tennessee Titans in the playoffs, good luck stopping Derrick Henry. So although I was impressed by the Buffalo Bills, I just think they had a great matchup in terms of off their wide receivers against the Seattle defensive backs. But I don't trust their running game, and their run defense isn't that great. I'd probably have them as my 6th best team in the NFL, so that's the reason why they didn't crack the top 5.
Yeah, and let's talk about year 1 and 2, Pittsburgh and Kansas City. You talk about Kansas City a little bit. That's a 2-point game against the Carolina Panthers, who lost to the Atlanta Falcons a couple weeks ago. So, a little bit disappointed from the Chiefs. I know the offense, puts up 33, but that defense, I know there's Christian McCaffrey out on the field, but they still need to do a little bit of a better job. And then for the Steelers, they struggle a little bit. Maybe they're just a little bit too overconfident going into the game against the, Dallas Cowboys. But that Dallas Cowboys defense has been much improved over the past 2 weeks. I know no one really cares about the Cowboys anymore, what that defense has to, how much they've improved. But, I have to give it to them. They've played very well on the defensive side of the ball at least. And then the Steelers, their schedule going forward is not very tough. So maybe they could go undefeated. They still have to play the Ravens one more time. And I think that's going to be a very key game to see, who has the number 1 seed in the AFC. But for now, I have to stick with the undefeated team. Going undefeated in the NFL is a tough task to do. And, the Chiefs couldn't do it, but the Steelers can so far. So that's why I have them at the number 1.
I mean, you're right, absolutely. And this is not a, close decision. What really came down to it was at the moment, I have more trust in Kansas City. They're coming off a Super Bowl win. And into this season, they dropped one against the Raiders. And there's been moments this season where they haven't looked very dominant. Patrick Mahomes hasn't looked outstanding, but only 1 interception on the season. Right now, I think the best bet in all sports is Russell Wilson for MVP because he's not the favorite anymore. The favorite is now Patrick Mahomes. And when you have number 15 on the field, chances are you're going to win that game, regardless of the situation. And in this case, if those two teams played, do I trust the Steelers' running game, which has been on and off, and it feels like James Conner is closer to a top 30 running back than he is a top 10 running back, which I think you would agree with. They have good, flashy weapons on the outside, but is Big Ben really the quarterback to, consistently deliver the ball? And he's been solid, but he still has that injury risk, which we saw was a scare on Sunday against the Cowboys. And that defense, it's good, but it can get very complacent at times. Now, if they played against the Kansas City Chiefs, I know they would get, riled up for that game and they would be playing with their hair on fire, like every team does, because it's the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl champions, the biggest targets on their back. So, of course, Carolina's going to play their best game. Or Las Vegas is going to play their best game. Every team's going to play their best game against Kansas City. And Kansas City's 8-1. So – through 9 weeks, maybe Steelers lose and both teams are 8-1. I don't know, but I'm very excited by the top of the AFC. I think these are definitely the two best teams. Now we'll see what happens in that Thanksgiving night game against the Baltimore Ravens. If the Ravens can get their revenge on the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it's definitely an argument to be had between the two teams. Obviously, the better defense, the Steelers. And if defense wins championships, then go Steelers, go. Here we go.
Yeah, I know the defense is solid. Definitely one of the better units in the whole NFL. But on the offensive side, you're underrating Big Ben just a little bit. You talk about the weapons he has. Maybe James Conner and Benny Snell Jr. aren't the best running backs in the league, but they still have a solid offensive line. And then on the outsides with Juju Smith-Schuster, Deontay Johnson, and young rookie Chase Claypool, he has plenty of weapons to do with on the offensive side. So if he can have, a good game on any given week, and with that defense, maybe they're not as motivated to, play Garrett Gilbert, on a 3:00 game on Sunday against a lowly Cowboys team, but they'll be ready to play anyone else who has a winning record this season.
Absolutely. So that is our top fives at the moment. Are there any other big takeaways? Any teams that you think could possibly jump in there that we haven't talked about yet, Laraib?
The Tennessee Titans, 6-2. They had a quiet game against the Chicago Bears, but they're 6-2 and they could definitely sneak in. And then Tampa Bay, for me at least, Tampa Bay and both Green Bay, both Green Bay 6-2, Tampa Bay 6-3. Both of them have had blowout losses, which is why I really haven't had them in my top five over the last 2 weeks. Just because the Seahawks have 2 losses, but those have been close games that easily could have been wins. For the Seahawks this week, we saw that one play where Pete Carroll decides to blitz everyone, and they just leave Jaron Brown wide open and let him run to the 2-yard lines, which was concerning type of play. But that game was still close going to the late third quarter, but then Josh Allen just blew it open. But, they haven't lost by a wide margin like the Packers had or the Buccaneers had. But they could sneak into the top 5 just because of their schedule going forward.
Yeah, and the team for me that's a potential wild card, much to your chagrin, is the Los Angeles Rams. I know they're coming off a very tough loss against the Miami Dolphins where Jared Goff did not look impressive whatsoever. But with a win on Sunday, they will be the NFC West champions. And if they can keep that momentum going throughout the season, this team has potential to be very dangerous. I'm going to give some love to the Cardinals as well, even though they lost to the Miami Dolphins. Well, that NFC West is really starting to heat up, minus the 49ers. So those are 2 teams you could definitely try to throw in there as potential wild cards. Besides that, I think there's no other big team for me. Like you said, I think Tampa's still alive in the conversation if they can, get back on track, ingratiate Antonio Brown to this offense. But I don't think it's about playmakers in Tampa. I think it's about offensive and defensive line. And those 2 units need to be the best units on the field if they want to win games. And that's how it is for every team, quite honestly. And then we have, like you said, the Tennessee Titans. After that blowout win against Buffalo, they haven't looked very impressive really this season. But I think they have the team to really turn it around. I would if I was Mike Vrabel, I wouldn't use Derrick Henry that much in the next coming weeks unless you're playing a team that you think you need to beat. Save him for the postseason. Let him go on one of those King Henry tears he has, and you could get all the way to the Super Bowl. So that's another team that impresses me. But we are going to move on from our top 5 discussion as the playoff picture is starting to take fold. All right, Laraib, we're going to do a this or that. We did this for quarterbacks. Now we're going to do it with teams' futures. So I'm going to give you a future. I'm going to go 7 years. So I'm going to give you 2 teams. In which team's position would you rather be in for the next 7 years, including this season? All right. So, you can interpret this as whatever you'd like. You can think of it as, am I doing this in terms of how many championships am I going to win? Or, how many MVPs is my quarterback going to have? And am I going to make steps, in a positive direction to really get my quarterback and my team at the highest level that they can be? We'll see. So, you ready, Laraib?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, let's start off with who has the brighter future, the Miami Dolphins or the Buffalo Bills?
Oh, this is a
Start
tough
off with some
one.
heat.
This is a tough one. Just right off the bat, you gave me a hard one. Dolphins, we talked about how the defenses are playing along with rookie quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. And then for the Bills, Josh Allen looks like he has a bright future there in Buffalo. But, give me the Dolphins just because of the defense has been stout this season, looking really good. I have young corners like Xavier Howard, Byron Jones, and Kyle Van Noy, former Patriot. And then their head coach with Brian Flores, he's pretty young. And then you have rookie quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who's been playing pretty well. So just give me them over the Bills just because the Bills really don't have any 2 young pieces on the defensive side. They signed Tre'Davious White to a big contract, and then, Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. But besides that, the defense, nothing too flashy. But on the offensive side, they have some nice young pieces in Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. But, running back situation, they need to get that handled. Zach Moss has been he's been getting more carries than Devin Singletary the past couple of weeks, and he could be a nice replacement. But for now, just give me the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with you right now, and I might be playing a little bit of devil's advocate because I really love what Miami has done so far this season. I love their head coach, but I also really love Sean McDermott. And I think he's one of the more underrated coaches in the NFL of just how he gets his teams ready to play. Great motivator, great defensive mind. I know their defense hasn't been great recently, but they're historically a great defense, so you can count on them, bringing in some talent over the next few off seasons. And I feel like they really have their guy. Josh Allen has come on super strong this season. He's proven to me that he can be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL for a playoff potential Super Bowl team. He just needs those pieces around him. I think he needs a better running game. Like you said, Zach Moss looks good. Devin Singletary is okay. But you need to improve that offensive line in the running game. You can maybe do a running back by committee or draft a 3rd round, running back. Hopefully he becomes a stud, like an Alvin Kamara per se. And then, you have all the deep threats, but you need a stud tight end. And if you can get that stud tight end, Dawson Knox has been solid for you, but I don't think he's that, Pro Bowl type tight end. But those are the few holes. I mean, and defensively, middle linebacker Matt Milano has been solid, but I think you could use a little bit of an upgrade. And the secondary is great. Defensive line, maybe you could use a stud, but a lot of promise for this team in the Miami Dolphins. The biggest thing for me is the quarterbacks. I need to see Tua play a bit more. Right now, I love Josh Allen more, and just that point is what gives the Bills the edge for me. But if Tua comes out the rest of the season just, playing on fire, then it's going to be hard for me to pick the Bills over the Dolphins. So, all right, Rob, are you ready for your next 2 teams?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, these are going to be 2 NFC teams. The Carolina Panthers or the Arizona Cardinals?
Oh, man, this is a tough one. But, give me uh give me give me the Cardinals just because Kyler Murray is that much better than Teddy Bridgewater. I know Carolina Panthers, they have a lot of great pieces, young pieces on the defensive side. Brian Chung Jeremy
Jeremy Chin.
yeah,
Oh my
Jeremy
gosh, I
Chin.
love him. I love him so much.
Jeremy Chin, and then Brian Burns, excuse me. He's a defensive end, and he's been playing very well. So, the defense is nice young pieces, and then you have Christian McCaffrey on the offensive side, along with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, all have looked great. But, I just like the Arizona Cardinals that much more just because of Cliff Kingsbury. He can be on and off as a head coach, but he's been, the Cardinals are 5-3 right now, and Kyler Murray, he's looking very good. And then you have Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds at the running back position. They're very nice. And then, at the receivers, you have DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best in the league. And on the defense, you have Patrick Peterson and Buda Baker. All of them playing very well. So just give me the Cardinals just because of how much more I can trust their pieces more than I can of the Carolina Panthers. For the Panthers, Coach Matt Rule has been one of the better ones this season. He's been better than Joe Judge has been. But the Panthers are 3-6 right now. They've had some bright flashes, but they've been struggling a little bit too much for me this season.
This is really tough for me. And because, like you said, those young defensive pieces on Carolina are extremely impressive. But also, Kyler Murray is definitely the quarterback. Well, there's still some questions about Teddy Bridgewater, if he's really the future quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. I think Matt Rule is a better head coach than Cliff Kingsbury. I think he's proven it so far as just a game planner. And, they're really putting the scare of God into all of these teams. They almost beat New Orleans on a 65-yard field goal. And then they almost beat Kansas City on a 67-yard field goal. If they can get those 10 extra yards, they're 5-3, and they're looking to make the playoffs. So I'm going to give the edge to Carolina, and here's why. I understand the quarterback situation, and if another quarterback's in there, maybe they beat those teams. But if I'm looking at the next 7 years, you have to take into account division. And the NFC West for the next 7 years is still going to be a tough division. Now, there's question marks on what's going to be the future of a Seattle. Not Seattle, a San Francisco. Is Jimmy G going to be there? They're still going to have a good defense, but it's what's going to be the future over there? The Rams are going to be solid as long as they have Sean McVay and Jared Goff. And Seattle's going to have Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson for the next, 5 years. So, but I look at the NFC South. Drew Brees is on his way out. Tom Brady's on his way out. And then you have a Matt Ryan Atlanta Falcons team, which can explode at any moment. Regarding to whoever the GM and head coach are going to be the next few years. So Carolina, it seems they have their guide coach. Quarterback is promising, and they are the real young team in that division that could dominate for the next few years, much to my chagrin. But that's the biggest thing for me outside of quarterback. I'm going to give the edge to the Carolina Panthers in this situation.
Yeah, well, for the Saints, they could, Jameis Winston, he could fit right into the Saints offense, and then he has a plethora of weapons on the outside, and you still have Alvin Kamara on the offensive side of the ball, and then for the, maybe the Falcons go out and draft another quarterback, and same for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Even if they don't have a good quarterback, they still have a lot of nice pieces in Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Chris Godwin. So, this is a hard one to pick, but I still have to pick the Cardinals in this one.
All right, Laraib, I'm going to give you one final one. And this one is going to be tough for all the wrong reasons. The New York Jets.
I'm not picking the Jets.
Or the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I'll pick the Jaguars just because of how bad. As long as Joe Douglas and Adam Gase are, the front office managers and the head coach of the New York Jets, I have to pick the Jacksonville Jaguars. You can have Trevor Lawrence, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you have just an abysmal head coach and Adam Gase who has no idea what he's doing on a football field, give me the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the Jaguars, we've seen them be a good team. Their defense past couple years was one of the best in the league, and they could probably go out and get some more pieces just like they did before, and then they'll probably have a top draft pick this year. So maybe if they don't get Trevor Lawrence, maybe they can still get someone like a Justin Fields as a new quarterback, and they have a lot to look forward to on the offensive side of the ball. Undrafted rookie James Robinson, he's been really good this season, along with DJ Chark, who's been he had a great game with Jake Luton last week. So a lot of promise for that Jacksonville team going forward in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I just kind of wanted to throw the Jets in the conversation in terms of the future. Maybe give them a little hope. Maybe if you get Trevor Lawrence, this might change the discussion. I was going to come in here and say whoever gets Trevor Lawrence is the team that's going to have the brighter future because he's a generational talent. But even on the Jets, it's not looking good. Like you said, as long as Joe Douglas is there, and this is the year for Adam Gase. I'm convinced at this point they're keeping him just to, because it's going to give them the best chance to lose, which seems like this is the best strategy for them going forward. And as a Jets fan, this is what I want. I want Trevor Lawrence, and I want to be bad. If you're going to jeopardize our future, missing out on this transformational talent because you want to beat the New England Patriots just to stick it to them, then that's a failing organization. So they did what they needed to do. They lost to the Patriots, and they're going to have the number 1 overall pick. But the Jags, I love some of their young pieces on defense. I really do. They have talent there. And then, like you said, even if they don't get a Trevor Lawrence, there's still great quarterback talent in this draft class, like a Justin Fields or a Kyle Trask, a Trey Lance, Zach Wilson from BYU. There's talent all over the board. So it's going to be their pickings to really whoever they want. And, the Jets, they're going to get rid of Adam Gase, and there's potential to get a better coach if you're going to have one of the biggest attractions for a new head coach. And, hey, we have Trevor Lawrence. Come coach him. But also, I would clean house. I would get rid of the GM and the head coach, let 2 new guys come in and be the future for my New York Jets football team. So like we said, we agree on that one. And with that concludes our this or that for the next team's futures. I like this segment. We might bring it back. There's some teams we can still talk about. How about the Bengals? How about the Chargers? How about the Browns, the Texans? A lot of teams still yet to talk about. But we're going to move on now. We're going to go over our Thursday night football game picks, and we're going to wrap up the episode. So I'm going to get started right now. We have the Indianapolis Colts at 5-3, traveling to Tennessee to face the 6-2 Titans. Titans are favored by 2 points in this game. I like the Titans in this matchup, but this is tough because we have a struggling Tennessee defense, which they traded for Logan Ryan. He made a bunch of key plays for them defensively. No, not Logan Ryan.
No, Logan Ryan.
Desmond King. They traded for Desmond King, and he has been playing very. He had a scoop and score for them against the Bears. And granted, it was the Bears, so you can't put much stock into that. And the Colts are better than the Bears. But I'm not picking the Colts. I'm sorry. It's not happening the rest of the season. They have to be playing the Jaguars in order for me to pick them. And even then, my upset of the week might be the Jaguars.
This is going to be – I don't know. Go ahead.
The rivers are dry in Indianapolis, no doubt about it. And this is a matchup in which I see the biggest matchup, Darius Leonard versus Derrick Henry for the division. Battle of the 2 unstoppable forces. We'll see how this goes down. I'm going to give the edge to Derrick Henry because I think Ryan Tannehill gives that offense a lot more depth than the Colts offense has. And if Phillip Rivers has some turnovers in this game, it could cause trouble. So give me Tennessee in this matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game to watch, a nice divisional game of 2 decent teams. Tennessee Titans, Super Bowl hopefuls this year, but for the Colts, that defense we saw against the Baltimore Ravens last week, it was not bending. It was not breaking at all against, the Ravens. Ravens could not do anything offensively against the Colts. But in the second half, the floodgates just opened. That defense can only hold for so long until finally, the Ravens just keep on punching them in the mouth, and then Lamar Jackson finally gets a rushing touchdown to really put that game away. And I think that's what's going to happen in this game. The Titans are going to struggle against this Colts defense, but once it gets to the second half, eventually it's going to be a big run by Derrick Henry that's going to put the game away. And then for the Colts on the offensive side of the ball, Philip Rivers, he's due for a turnover or two every game, no matter what defense he's playing. So that's going to give the Titans some field position, some good field position against this team. So give me the Titans in this one. It's going to be a nice, fun game to watch. I think it's going to be a pretty close game going into the fourth quarter. But give me the Titans this one, 27-20.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. I don't have faith with this Colts offense. I don't know what I'm getting every week. T.Y. Hilton's battling injuries. Mo Alley Cox, one of their best red zone weapons, has been battling injuries the past few weeks. And without that, real big outside threat for the Colts this season, I'm going to give this edge to the Tennessee Titans. I'm liking what I'm seeing. Tough win over the good Bears defense. They find their rhythm again, and they're going to take a stranglehold on the division. Give me Tennessee in this matchup. So that's going to conclude our score. I'm going to go 24-22 in this game. Close game. I'm going to give the Colts some respect, but they're not winning, at least by my metrics. So we have a bunch of more exciting games for you coming up next week. 49ers, Saints, Seahawks, Rams, Bills, Cardinals. Tua against Justin Herbert. We'll give you our predictions for all these games next or tomorrow night. It'll be available for you Friday morning. We can't wait to get that ready for you. And we have a surprise update coming for you regarding the future of this channel tomorrow. I haven't told you about it even yet.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either.
But it's going to be a surprise for everyone about how might be changing up the content pretty soon in regards to a certain sport coming back. Now you get it.
Okay, there we go.
So get ready for that. And like usual, our social medias, Twitter and Instagram will be plugged in the bio. We're going to give you updates on every single time we post, so get ready for that. Besides that, Laraib, you got anything?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. So if one person has managed to watch all the way towards the end, send me a picture of Trevor Lawrence photoshopped in a Jets jersey, and I will send you $5 on Venmo.
And if you can send me or any of our social media accounts a picture of Tua Tagovailoa, just a picture of him, no context needed. Send me a picture of Tua Ticonderoga, and you'll get a little prize in your Venmo, wink, wink. But besides that will do it all for this episode. Laraib, any closing remarks?
No, just be on the lookout for our predictions episode that will be coming out tomorrow night or Friday morning for you guys.
All right, that'll do it. Y'all have a good night.
All right, see y'all.